All right, let's kick it off. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for joining this GetFTR update webinar. We're pleased to have you and excited to present you some of the latest developments in GetFTR. My name is Hielke Koers. I'm the Chief Information Officer for STM Solutions, and I also serve as Program Director for GetFTR, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you here today. We have an excellent lineup of speakers. We have Heather Staines giving a general overview and update. Marlo will speak about GetFTR integration on reference lists, and then we have Diane giving a product update with some exciting new developments and new directions that we're heading into. And then at the end, we have ample time for Q&A and open discussions. Before I hand you over to Heather as our first speaker, a few householding items. The first item is that I wanted to make you aware that we are recording the session. Of course, you are invited to put your camera on, but also feel completely free to put your camera off if you prefer. The second thing, this is a general Zoom meeting, so we do ask you to make sure that you are muted if you are not speaking to prevent background noise. And thirdly, we will do the presentations first and then have Q&A and discussions at the end. If you have a question during the presentations, please feel free to already put that in the chat. And then we have that as a holding ground for the questions after the last presentation. With those items of housekeeping out of the way, let me hand it over to Heather to give you a general overview and update. Heather, over to you, please.
Thanks so much, Hielke. It's a pleasure to be here today and to see so many familiar names amongst the attendees and some new names as well. As Hielke said, I'm going to be doing a brief overview and update. And if there's anything I miss or it's a too high level or the like, we can take that up in the Q&A section. So many of you are from GetFTR participating publishers, and you already know, but for the new folks, GetFTR has been around for a couple of years now, 3 years, and it was intended to accelerate the discovery and access of authoritative and trusted research. Two adjectives there that are increasingly important across the industry, as the days go by. On the right-hand side, you see the 5 founding publishers without whose collaboration and assistance the kickoff for GetFTR would not have been possible. So we thank them and as well for their continuing ongoing support in terms of in-kind contributions as well as monetary contributions. So GetFTR is intended to make things easier for researchers. We're going to get them to the best version of the article that's available for them through a single smart link. That should increase the maximum number of articles that they can access, making their research lives easier. We combine different sources and entitlement systems to get them that widest possible range. It's also intended to give them a really cohesive user experience so they don't have to kind of re-situate themselves and learn context across multiple sites repeatedly as, again, they try to undertake their research. And so we want to take friction out of the authentication process for them, and we'll tell you a little bit about how we do that. Next slide, please. So for those of you who aren't aware how GetFTR works, we've got this wonderful little diagram flow that we've been using for some time. It's very, very helpful. So on the left-hand side, number 1, we have our researcher. She goes to her preferred starting point. That might be a discovery service. That might be a scholarly collaboration network. She can search by DOI. She can search by article title, by keyword. She goes ahead and executes that search. Behind the scenes, the GetFTR API take those DOIs that are associated with her search and run her entitlements against those participating publishers. As she's doing her search, those smart links will populate her search results. So she'll be able to just click on an article, get right to the full text. Happens in the blink of an eye. If you don't look closely, you will certainly miss it. But that's how the process is working behind the scenes. Next slide, please. So there's a couple of different ways that discovery services and collaboration networks can integrate GetFTR. So we wanted to show you a couple of examples of how that happens. So on the left-hand side is an example taken from Semantic Scholar from the Allen Institute. So they have a button that says access PDF via your institution, and then just there to the left, you can see that little circle with the two arcs around it, which is part of the GetFTR indicator. The user will then be able to click on that and kick off the process we showed just on the prior slide. This is an example of integrating GetFTR into your discovery website. A second way that an integration is possible is through an app. So there in the center, we see a screenshot from the Researcher app. They have embedded a smart link behind the title for the article, and they're just to the left. Again, you see the little circle with the two arcs of the GetFTR indicator. And finally, on the right, we have a screenshot from ReadCube papers from Digital Science. And this is an example of integrating GetFTR within browser extension functionality. So here we see this is a PubMed search. And then when the user hovers over the View PDF button, they get a little pop-up that says MIT provides access to the PDF with a little GetFTR indicator right there to give them a visual cue. So different integrators are coming on all the time, utilizing these different options, whatever fits best with their UI. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that GetFTR is meant to reduce the unnecessary steps that researchers might have to go through when they're trying to get to their content. So we wanted to show you how that works. So the left-hand side is an example here. User has done a search on a discovery service. Their results contain articles from Elsevier and Wiley. That first result there, which is an Elsevier result, they click View the PDF. Now, if they're not already authenticated, if we're not recognizing their IP range and they're not logged in through federated authentication already, they will be routed through their regular institutional login flow. So you see here the Harvard University login flow. Once they've completed the necessary steps for that, they get one-click access to their content. The second search result this time a Wiley article, they're already authenticated. This is the same there's part of their same instance that they're working in. So they click, they don't have to go through an authenticated flow again, their same session, was stretching for a word for that. They don't have to go through the authentication flow. They go right to the article that they've requested. So GetFTR does not do, the authentication. That still happens on the university side as usual. Next slide. So just an update, and every time I show this, I say, hey, we're going to have to divide this into multiple slides because there's just so much going on. It's very exciting. The left-hand side here shows the leading integrators who are already using GetFTR. I mentioned digital science. You can see the other digital science suite of products there, a number of Elsevier properties that you can see, discovery services by the founding publishers, including Springer Nature Experiments, the Wiley Online Library, and CAS SciFinder, as well as some A&I services that have come on board recently, APA PsycInfo, Deep Dive, My Science Work. Different integrators are adding all the time. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that we currently provide access through participating publishers to more than 50% of scholarly articles that are published each year. We have our two of our main platform providers at the top, Adapon and Silverchair. Recently, KGL Pub Factory completed their integration. And so you can see a variety of the founding publishers, as well as additional publishers via those platform hosts, as well as publishers who do own and run their own platforms. So quite a lot going on in the space. In the center there, what you see are the 100 million, more than 100 million entitlement decisions that GetFTR fields per week. You can see that steady growth since back in the spring of 2020. We're very pleased, at that curve, and more publishers, platforms, and integrators are joining soon. Next slide, please. Recently, we published on the website and distributed through the newsletter. If you don't get the newsletter, you should sign up for that. Definitely recommend that. A case study done by the American Society of Microbiology, who looked at how GetFTR impacts their usage. Lots of detail in the case study. If you want to know more about it, we can go through that. But we did see an increase in the number of article downloads with GetFTR turned on versus with GetFTR turned off. And we're looking right now to some of our other participating publishers to try to replicate this experiment to see if we find a similar uplift in usage for them. We've got the link in the slides if you want to take a look at the whole use case. Next slide, please. And one thing which we're going to be hearing about today, so this is a great slide to lead up to Marlo's presentation, is publishers integrating with GetFTR to provide streamlined access to references. So sometime back, if you've attended one of these webinars before, I used to say you wouldn't see GetFTR links on the publisher site, that those were things that happened upstream in discovery services. But with the reference links integration, I can no longer say that. So it makes my job a little bit more complicated, but also more exciting as we see, in effect, each article page becoming a little mini discovery service on the references. So there are many links that publishers do provide. You can see here an example in the center from Science Direct. They have found that hovering over that first view PDF button showing this article is free to access, in this case, an open access article with a little GetFTR indicator, that the user is clicking more often on that link, in contrast to some of the other links and the analytics that come from there. The bottom screenshot is an example from the Wiley Online Library reference list. And you can see then also in the hover overview, full text access is provided there. So some great visual cues being provided from publisher reference lists. So it's a very exciting development. We'll hear more about that in just a moment. And I think that's my last slide. So I am happy to hand over the discussion to Marlo Harris. Marlo is Senior Director, Digital Publishing and Platforms at Wiley. She leads the teams that evolve and operate Wiley Online Library and Wiley's submission and peer review systems. She's responsible for ensuring that platforms meet customer needs and align with Wiley research strategies. Over her 26 years in scholarly publishing, so she and I are contemporaries in that regard, Marlo has held various roles in editorial, marketing, technology, and product management at Wiley and at Adipon. So welcome, Marlo. We're very, very excited to have you join us today, and we want to hear what you have to say.
Great, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Marlo Harris. I come from Wiley, where part of my job is managing the team of product managers who evolve Wiley Online Library with the implementation of new features and capabilities. So today, I am going to talk about our implementation of GetFTR on Wiley Online Library reference lists and citations. So on the next slide is just a brief list of what I'll cover today, which is what our objectives were with the implementation, the UI presentation of GetFTR, the usability and performance factors that were considered in our implementation, and a very brief summary of our results to date of that implementation. So just a quick overview of our objectives for implementing GetFTR on Wiley Online Library. Very much aligns with the goals of GetFTR in general. So obviously we want to improve the user experience for entitled content. One of our primary goals for any feature on Wiley Online Library is to reduce barriers to accessing content. And that's really what this first bullet is about, is improving that user experience when the user is entitled to content via a subscription or open access or whatnot. So by flagging that access and facilitating the authentication process, that's obviously a great improvement for users. The second bullet here, is about encouraging click-throughs with an updated design. And I'll talk more about this in a couple slides, but this was what I mean by this. It was really kind of an opportunity to spice up our reference lists on Wiley Online Library to try to encourage some clicks. And then in terms of contributing to consistency across publisher platforms, Heather touched on this a bit just previously in her presentation. You know, although most content delivery platforms have the same functions, quite often users have to figure out how to use the same function on different platforms, which isn't always helpful. So we're always very keen to contribute to some sort of consistency in user experience across platforms. So the GetFTR links appear in a number of places on Wiley Online Library, which is all the reference lists and the citation lists. So here is just a visual representation of each of those placements. So there's a lot of opportunity for users to take advantage of the links. In terms of our presentation, or the just a bit of background or context around the UI, we followed version 3 of the GetFTR usability guidelines, which are very comprehensive and based on user research, but leave enough room for platform-specific customization. In particular, as noted here, we applied the Wiley Online Library color palette to the button. We added the tooltips, which Heather showed a little while ago. One additional thing we did, which I don't believe is in the usability guidelines, but we thought it was important, was to add a loading animation that appears when the entitlements are being checked. And we thought that that was important because it's the GetFTR response times are fast enough that shows for a very short amount of time. But if the user has bandwidth problems that may interfere with their experience, it's particularly helpful in those sorts of situations so that they know that something's coming if there's some interruption with their connection. And it prevents, it kind of maintains the integrity of the page content structure so that, you know, lines of text aren't jumping around while the entitlements are being checked. And lastly is the point that the GetFTR buttons essentially replace the former Crossref links that are pretty prolific through probably every publisher's platform. This also kind of speaks to what I was saying before about an opportunity to update the UI to hopefully encourage some click-throughs that we might not have had before. And I've got some notes here about the performance optimization that we implemented with the Wiley Online Library version, which is, to clarify, this is the performance here refers to our front-end performance of Wiley Online Library, not the performance of the GetFTR API response times, which have their own discrete response time guidelines. This was more about making sure that our front end could handle the implementation at scale, because front-end performance is always a concern when adding a new feature to an article page due to the scale of the content and the number of pages. So some things we did just to try to maintain some of that performance integrity. We made sure that entitlements are checked, or the API is called when a user selects the references or citing literature section. It's not just on page load, it waits for that user action. We also are calling the article entitlements in batches of 6. So as the user scrolls down, so even if a reference list is very, very long, you know, it's possible that an article could have thousands of references in some extreme cases. We don't try to call all of those at the same time. As the user scrolls down, it will call the entitlements in batches of 6. And we also use our own local entitlement check for content that is already published on the Wiley Online Library platform. So those are some things we did during implementation to make sure that the front end didn't take too much of a hit. For the rollout, we also employed a kind of phased rollout, because although we could simulate high levels of traffic and page load in a QA environment, it's a bit of a risk to do that in the production environment at scale. So we developed a mechanism that allowed us to specify the percentage of users who would see GetFTR buttons at any given time. I think we started as low as 10% and slowly ramped up that percentage every few days in batches of 10%, I believe, checking the performance every day just to make sure there wasn't any problem that we hadn't caught in testing. As it happens, no issues were found, everything was fine, and we reached 100% coverage in about 4 to 5 weeks after we implemented, which was in mid-December. So those are what we did. Those are the things we did to kind of ensure smooth rollout and maintenance of the links. And here we have a, as you can see, it's not a particularly detailed summary or analysis of the results we have to date. We haven't yet taken a genuine deep dive into the analytics to see what kind of trends or opportunities that there might be just yet. But we still think this is a useful high-level interpretation of the data we have so far. Unfortunately, due to some data capture limitations before the implementation, we aren't able to compare pre-GetFTR link click-throughs of reference link versus after, but we can see what's been happening since the implementation, and the vast majority of users are clicking on the GetFTR links over the other reference links. Of course, there are many factors that could play into that, whether that's design or language or just the order of links. But regardless of the intent, this is at least shows us that users are getting to the version of record or the best available version that we want users to be going to as a first port of call. And that pretty much sums up. This slide should say thank you underneath the bicycle. I somehow deleted that, so I hope it's implied anyway. And if
probably my fault, Marla, when I converted the slides, it probably dropped off.
Oh no, I doubt it. No. So yeah, so that wraps things up for me, and I think if there are any questions, we'll take them later on.
Thank you. Now we'll hand over to Diane.
Thanks, Heather. If we go to the next slide. So we're pleased to announce a new GetFTR service, which increases pathways to trusted content. We've developed a free-to-use browser extension, which, when downloaded from the Chrome store, adds GetFTR links to popular discovery services such as Google Scholar, PubMed, and Web of Science, without that service needing to integrate with GetFTR. So on the right-hand side, you can see examples of Google Scholar search results and a PubMed article page with those GetFTR links, indicating to the researcher that they have access to content, either through their institution subscriptions or because content is freely available. We launched the browser extension beta a few weeks ago, and we're inviting researchers and librarians to participate and provide feedback. And this feedback is important to us as we're continuously improving the service based on suggestions and adding new discovery services all the time. We move on to the next slide. I've recorded a demo of the browser extension to show how easy it is to set up and use. Hilke, if you can please run that video.
Coming up.
So beta participants will be added with a link to the Chrome store where they can add the extension to Chrome. And then they're taken through a number of onboarding pages. So the first, they select one or many institutions that they're affiliated with. Then they're able to enable discovery services to display those GetFTR links. And lastly, the GetFTR extension can be pinned to their toolbar for easy access when updating institutions or discovery services at a later date. And then after completing onboarding, researchers can now benefit from GetFTR links in the discovery services that they enabled. Here's an example of Google Scholar, and here is PubMed. And at any time, they can easily update their institutions and discovery services or send feedback to the GetFTR team. If we go back to the slide, thanks, Hilke. And yeah, today we invite you to join the beta by using the link, which I will share in chat. Please also share with researchers and librarians in your network. As I mentioned, we're looking to increase participation in the beta to get your feedback. And if you're a publisher that hasn't joined GetFTR and are interested in providing access to your content via the extension and other GetFTR enabled services, please contact us at the Join Us email address on this slide. Thank you so much. Handing back to you, Hilke.
Thank you very much to you, Diane, and to Heather and Marlo, all of our speakers, for those very nice presentations. Opening it up for questions to see if people might have any questions. Let me stop the screen share. I didn't see any questions in the chat so far, but if people have questions now, feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat. There's also a link to the browser extension, which we encourage everybody to take a look at. I have one question to get started, perhaps. Marlo, could you say anything about, did you receive any user feedback after you have implemented the GetFTR links on the reference list?
Sorry, just trying to find my video. No, we haven't received any that I've been made aware of, which we kind of expected, given the reference, the nature of the placement of reference links and the use of reference links. We weren't expecting users to notice a before and after difference, I would say. So the short answer is no.
All right, thank you. We have some questions coming in over the chat. James A is asking, how are entitlements checked? Heather, can I give that question to you? I think you briefly spoke about that in the presentation with the visual. I could bring that up if you'd like.
Sure. So the short answer is that the participating publishers or their hosts on their behalf create an API, which has access to real-time entitlements checks. So some of you may be aware of other services like Google Casa, which require researchers to occasionally return to campus, or some indicators perhaps on like Google Scholar that are at a journal level. But the GetFTR entitlements check goes according to the DOI for each piece of content, whether that user's institution is a subscriber, if it's paywalled content, or whether it's open access or free to read, in which case it's available to everyone. So it is a real-time article level DOI check that happens. And if you do have multiple institutions, you may need to toggle between them, but we're going to get you to as many of the articles that you can access as is possible. So hopefully that answers your questions. Did I miss anything with that, Hilke? I was trying to find the ASM case study when you threw over to me, so I was a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that answered the question, but more importantly, James, does that answer the question for you? And feel free to unmute and speak up if that's all right.
So we have a follow on there, Hilke. How does it recognize the user to check entitlements? And I'm going to give that one to Diane.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, so there's two ways that it recognizes the user. So the user's IP address can be sent through with the entitlement request, or the Discovery Service or Scholarly Collaboration Network can send the SAML entity ID, which the publisher can then use for federated authentication. I hope that answers your question.
Does that answer the question, James? Let's assume yes, otherwise I'm sure. Feel free to, sort of. James, if you can unmute, feel free to speak up. We could maybe have a bit of a conversation if that's all right.
Okay. So when I do a search in GetFTR, I'm not brought back a list of items immediately that I have access to, right? I get a list of everything, and authentication is checked at the point when I select an article.
Yeah, so if you take Mendeley as an example, if you're searching for content within Mendeley, you might have 10 search results, and each of those search results is a request that's sent to the publisher via GetFTR. And it would be using your institution IP address and DOI to check the entitlements for your institution. And where you're entitled, a GetFTR link will be provided next to the content in your search result.
I hope that clarifies. There's a couple of other questions as well. James, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll pick that up offline if that's all right. Scott Henry is asking if reference links will be added to Silverchair. Do we have any Silverchair colleagues on the webinar by chance? It's not really our place to comment on that. I believe they are interested, but I am not sure if that's already a committed item on the roadmap. That's a question.
Yeah,
for
I kind of thought that it already was possible, but it would be great to confirm that with them.
I would add to that if publishers ask for it, then it might go up the prioritization list.
So please make sure to ask that question to your contact at Silverchair. Matthew is asking if we could send a link to the white paper on usage. That's a case study, Matthew. Maybe Diane, Heather, if one of you could put the URL in the chat.
Matthew already found it further down and he put it in the chat already.
Oh, perfect. And going from the top to the bottom. Thank you for that. Perfect. Federico is asking if we will send a recording later in the day. Yes, we will, Federico. Stay tuned for that. Might be tomorrow, but we'll send you the recording. Karen is asking, how was GetFTR implemented on the ASM webpage, as there are no UI pictures in the white paper? Diane, do you want to pick that one up?
How is it implemented?
How is GetFTR implemented on the ASM webpage? And I think here there's a difference to be recognized between integrating from the publisher side and integrating from the integrator side.
Yeah, so ASM doesn't integrate on their references yet. So the experiment is looking at the number of referrals from some key discovery services. And as Heather mentioned, we looked at a period of time with GetFTR switched off compared to the same number of days with GetFTR switched on. And we saw that increase in referrals and article downloads.
Thank you, Diane. Does that address the question, Karen? Going to assume yes. Question from Scott Henry. If we are expecting to offer the browser extension also on other browsers, for example, Firefox. Diane, that's distinctly a question for you as our product director.
I should probably say that it does already work with Edge. I think Chrome extensions do work with Edge. We didn't have to develop anything to get that. And then in terms of other extensions, other browsers, we're really looking for that user feedback. So if users are requesting it, then we will add that.
Thank you, Diane. Let's see, I think that brings us to the bottom of the questions on the chat. Any other questions that people have?
I will say, Hilka, I got some private questions, just asking about other platforms who host. We are not yet integrated. Some of you may have noticed with Wolters Kluwer, but they do have quite a number of publishers who contribute content. And if you are out there and you're working with a publisher who hosts and you don't see them listed as either a participating publisher or a hosting platform, do let us know. If you ask them yourselves directly, that might get us a little bit more on their radar screen, and maybe they will hear. Maybe their ears are burning somewhere if they're mentioned here today, and they're not yet integrated. So any amount of awareness will help bump up a priority level.
Thank you very much for that, Heather. Opening it up to see if people have feedback about the things that they have heard today. A question is this the kind of update that you were looking for? Does it make sense? Do you like what you hear? Do you think we should be doing other things? Any feedback is welcome. This is your opportunity to influence the GetFTR roadmap. Very useful update. Thank you, Maxine. That's good to hear. And if people have other topics that they would like us to zoom in for future webinars, also please do let us know. And then we can develop the agenda a bit more tailored to a specific topic if that's of interest to people.
Yeah, I do want to mention that we have the STM spring meeting, not to steal any thunder if this was your thing you were going to move on to, Hilke, but
go for it. A number
of us will be in the Washington, D.C. area the last week of April for the STM spring meeting. I will also be in Toronto for the Council of Science Editors meeting. We have a GetFTR poster that will be displayed there, and I'll be able to answer any questions. We also have SSP coming up in Portland. So if you don't feel that you need to wait until those times, you can reach out and set up a call with us directly. But if you'd rather, talk face to face or a little bit more casually in one of those settings, look for us there.
Excellent. Yeah, would be great to also discuss in person. So please do reach out if you are attending one of those events and would like to have a chat with either Heather or myself. All right, some more feedback.
Sorry, there was a question. One more question was in the chat about distribution of the video. I think ideally we like to get videos out as quickly as possible. We do have a colleague that assists us who is not in the office today at STM. So I'm not sure when the final video will be sent, but we will do that as soon as possible.
Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. If there are no further questions or feedback, then let's adjourn. Let me thank the speakers one more time. Thank you, Marlo. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Heather, for the great presentations. I've also learned a few things today, so well done. Thank you very much. And hope to see you all soon. Have a great rest of the week. Thank you.